would be your advice to yourself at the age of university?
Oh, to chill out. Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist and my main interest is in mental health and specifically youth mental health. So I'm interested in how emotional difficulties come about for young people and what we can do to alleviate them and to help young people get on with their lives and develop. I think what people often sort of assume about psychology, that it's all about individuals and how individuals sort of, develop, how their thinking develops and their relationships. But we know that psychology offers much more insight sort of systemically, in terms of politics, the way our communities function, how people relate on a more societal level. I think psychology can actually tell us a lot about sort of group responses and societal responses. So I think more recently we saw a lot of forays into sort of public health, and community psychology has a bit of a revival of people thinking much more how we relate to our communities rather than just to each other as individuals. So the kind of systemic element to that. Well, there's often the party thing, if you tell people you're a psychologist or clinical psychologist in particular, people think you can read their mind or you have a better insight in people and their interactions than other people, which partially is of course true, but we don't read people's minds, so there's that. So it sometimes can change how people kind of approach you and interact with you. I think the other thing is that people don't often know what a psychologist actually does. So, a lot of people think you're like a psychiatrist or you may prescribe drugs, or that we're only dealing with mental ill health and, people that present to psychiatry, whereas I think applied psychology is much broader than that. Yeah, it's obviously a tough time, particularly in the UK and in particular in Scotland. I think young people are really quite young when they go to university, and they then cope with multiple transitions of leaving school, often leaving good friends behind, leaving family homes, moving out, living in a new situation where there's often, money might be a bit tighter, the living quarters might not be quite as luxurious as they may have been, and things like that. And at the same time, then adjusting to a new learning environment and actually getting used to demands of university, a different level of independence, of actually managing your own studying, not needing to be in class and so forth. So I think there are multiple demands and transitions that can weigh quite heavily. And I think people often underestimate the gaps, so feeling a bit lonely, feeling at a loose end, or just sort of, getting carried along with lots of activities that may also then feel too much kind of thing. So I think we see lots of young people just adjusting to that transition in better or worse ways. For us in particular, I think youth mental health is sort of right up there. I think there has been quite a lot in the press, particularly also at universities, of how apparently more prevalent kind of emotional distress and mental health issues are for young people, how young people are younger, how there's more of them who kind of struggle, and both in school and university and other places. I think it's coming much more to the forefront. I think we saw a massive increase in sort of developmental difficulties such as autism. People are becoming more aware of what autism, ADHD and other things are. And I think it's a really positive effect of sort of destigmatizing some of it. I think we are much more prepared to talk about anxiety, low mood, sort of, feeling a bit down, much more openly than we maybe did sort of 10, 15 years ago. So I personally don't believe that the prevalence has changed much. I think there's much more openness around people actually talking about their emotional difficulties and struggles, and that being more acceptable. But it does cause a bit of a crisis. So it's actually at the moment very hard to get appropriate help, and I'm not sure educational settings are yet fully prepared and equipped to actually respond to the emotional needs that are more openly communicated. in their communities. And then there's the whole intersection in terms of personal development, development of sexuality and so forth that obviously overlaps with mental health issues. And again, I think as institutions we can struggle a bit to adapt to that in a way that really feels acceptable to those that we serve. I brought in my cycling helmet because I think for me it just sort of represents sort of what I use to de-stress and what I use to have a bit of balance kind of thing. I do like exercise, and it just helps me to sometimes to ruminate and solve problems, but sometimes just to not think about work or anything in relation to that. And I think cycling is quite good for that, for me anyway, because it has quite a meditative component to it. It's a very repetitive action kind of thing, and it's also good exercise. So I do spend a lot of time on my bike every week and every year, and yeah, that's probably the main thing I tend to do outside of work. Oh, I always wanted to be a photojournalist and a travel photographer, and I think that was on my top list of alternative careers, and probably still is.
An academic with a hobby? That doesn't happen often.
Exercise, probably. Oh, Morocco. I mean, I love Edinburgh. I think Edinburgh is a really hard place to leave, and I think once you're in Edinburgh, it's quite difficult to find somewhere that compares. I love about Edinburgh that it's a cosmopolitan city with quite a high level of culture, excellent coffee shops, you know, before they started to spring up everywhere else, but also a city that's very easy to leave. You know, as I said earlier, within 20 minutes, you're either at a seaside, at a decent beach, and you can go for a swim, or 20 minutes in the other direction, you can go through for a cycle through some decent hills, and even further afield, I think where it's located in Scotland, it really offers great quality of life. From my perspective, the University of Edinburgh is a brilliant interdisciplinary space. I think it's an institution with really low walls between disciplines and parts of its institution, and I know it as a place where it's really easy and productive to talk to people in other fields and disciplines, and I think that has a really innovative and creative component kind of thing. So we started doing research and projects together with people in the Edinburgh College of Art, always working with people in sort of philosophy and sociology from a perspective, in medical sciences. So I think Edinburgh really facilitates that interdisciplinary space really well. That again is quite a difficult question to answer, because I do think that studying psychology and being a psychologist for the length of time that I have been in the field, of course, changed my way I think about relationships, people, our society. But I think it happens quite subtly. So I don't think I can pinpoint a moment where I feel sort of that was that turning point. Going back to actually, for the first time as quite a young person, working directly with people who were profoundly affected by the context they grew up in, and actually understanding mental health not as something that sits in our brains or is somehow this autonomous disease that just springs up, how we sometimes understand illness in more general terms, but actually understanding it as something that's created by context, and that also understanding that context gives us a different way of supporting and kind of answering some of those questions. I think that was a moment that kind of turned the way I understood the subject and probably the world around us a little bit.